Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Decisions Lunch and Learn. I am your host for today, Gregory Goldston, on Monday, May the 12th. So, kicking off this week. Decisions Product Roadmap Review has returned. Highly recommend signing up for it at decisions.com/events. And also check out our YouTube channel, Decision Support. There is a Decisions YouTube channel that also houses previous webinars that have been hosted, not like Lunch and Learn stuff, but other types of webinars that showcase different functionalities of the platform. But if you're looking for how-tos or trying to understand how to work in the platform more, Decision Support is your go-to. So recommend taking a look there if you need it. That's really all I've got to share right now. So I'm going to move over to my environment and we'll start answering some questions. All right. Give me just a moment while I do that. Yeah, this is the right screen. Here we go. Cool. All right. Y'all should be able to see my decisions environment now. And I see we already have a Q&A question, which is from Helmut. Let me get my attendees list up real quick and then I'll unmute you. Okay. Here we go. All right, you should be able to talk now. And the question is, you have a new project that you want to have the ability to change the status of a process folder based on external actions of another software. Can you demo a simple API to change the state of a process folder? And can this API be triggered by external software? Okay.
Hey,
Hello.
how you
So
doing today? Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, I'm doing quite well. Thank you for. Let me make sure that I
Oh,
understand the
good.
ask fully here before I start building something else. So you've
Yep.
got some sort of work queue that is, or you've got some sort of process that's going on in decisions. And at some point, that process needs to wait on an external service in order to complete the process and send it to the next state. And when you're talking about state, you're talking about something that's like a case entity here, right? Like a
Yeah, so normally we use flow execution extension data structures to represent these processes that we do. And in this project specifically, they fill out a form to create a security group name, and then it routes to certain people to be approved. And then once it's approved, we write a row to an intermediate table between decisions and our group and roles software. It's called SailPoint.
Okay.
And then once we write it to that intermediate table, then SailPoint picks it up. It makes a group, and then once it makes a group, it's going to update a field on that intermediate table saying, "Hey, SailPoint's done its part of the job. It's created the group." Um, and ideally, we'd like then for SailPoint to be able to ping an API that then says, "Hey, I've done what you've asked for this record. You can update the status to, complete." Because, typically the way we've done it is we do a lot with stored procedures and that kind of stuff. And so normally we would have to just run a job on some kind of interval, right, that checks for changes. But we'd like to try and use a bit more of the API abilities of decisions. I assume that this is something that's possible, but you could tell me otherwise.
That is absolutely possible. I'm trying to think about the best way to do it. And
I know you
what's
might not
coming to
have
my mind?
like a Postman or something that you can do this with, but even just kind of walking me through or talking me through it would be helpful.
That's exactly what I'm doing right now. So I'm going to create a structure with folder behavior because let's see. I'm going to put assignment ID in here because you're writing it to a table. So, and
And
then
you're using a entity. I'm still trying to get familiar with all the different, data structures. What prompts you to use the case versus like a flow execution extension data structure?
well, I'm actually using a case because I can't. We removed the ability to create flow execution structures in version 9.3 because the case
Ah,
entity basically does everything it does plus a little bit more.
okay.
So yeah, that's why I'm using the closest structure to yours that I've got.
Okay, but I could do either in version 8 and it would be the same. Okay.
Yes, you can absolutely do either one. So you've got something that you can preset states for. You can run actions or trigger flows while it's in certain states. So that's what you got going on here. So let's start your assignment flow, right? Because they fill out something, it goes to an intermediate table, all right? And then that waits on an external API. And once the API is done, you want to update the table and also tell decisions to, hey, run, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. So I think the best way we're going to do that is with two of these. Let's create a new one. This will be user form. Oop.
And if it makes it any easier construction wise, the API doesn't need to update the table or anything. They're going to update the table on their side. We really just need this API to be callable such that they can change the status on a specific process folder or entity,
Oh, okay. I
case
have a
entity.
wait, I do have a question then. So this API that's going to continue this flow is going to be run manually.
No, so when SailPoint on the other side creates the group that's been requested, they're gonna update a field in the intermediate table that says, "Yep, it's been the group's been created," and then
Mhm.
in my head that software will also then trigger the API that'll say, "Hey, for this process folder, update the status to complete."
Gotcha. All right. Cool, cool, cool.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, this will work then. And then I'll put a color here. All right, cool. So I'll get some text box so we have some fields. This won't take too long. You might not like a space there. Let me just do that. Okay, so here's how this is going to work. User's going to run this. They get this, they input their stuff, for whatever needs to go into it. And then we continue along the flow. We're going to get a set. We're actually going to do a create first. Is it searchable now? It is. Let's wait. Hello? There we go. Okay. Build on the extension data, right? Pass in this. I'm not going to be able to replicate this exactly without the external API, but I'll show you how it works with post. Actually, I might be able to. So let's go with email is going to be flow data. Email. We're not passing in that assignment ID yet. Ignore that. Folder name. Uh,
And just for clarity's sake, the assignment's going to be opened and closed before we ever write to that intermediate table. So the API doesn't have to like close the assignment from, you know, externally.
this assignment will be, right?
No, so the assignments are going to take place completely on the decision side. The only thing I want the API to do is, from that external software is to close or is to change the state on the process folder. So the approvals will be done, previous to us ever writing to that intermediate table.
So they do that. They do this assignment. I'm assuming this is assigned to a user. I've got it in session for our demo purposes, but this is assigned to a user. Um, it then goes into a certain state where it's awaiting the API call to update something.
Yeah.
And then after the user has already closed out their assignment while it's in that intermediate update, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
Because
cool.
because we don't want to write to the intermediate table until we know that this group name has been approved and all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
All right, then we're on the right track.
Okay.
Cool. Yep, because here's how we're going to do it. This is a very cool little function of decisions here.
And that's what
This,
I'm looking for.
this is not going to be assigned to a user. This will be assigned to, I'll put to a name session or a guest or something like that. I'll make it myself for now just so you can see what's going on. But this is going to be assigned to some entity that is not the user. All right. This is not going to be assigned to the user. And then what this does is I do need to give it a form. Uh, doesn't need anything on it. That's fine. all it is it's going to put the flow state in a suspended state where we want it to, and also allow for the API to get the necessary information to complete this call. So there are two ways we can do this. All right, this is one way. What this is going to do is this flow has started. The user comes here. I've created a case entity just so that we can, set it right here. And
Mm-hmm.
then what's going to happen here is this is going to be, I'm going to call this do the same thing. Actually, I'll just call this complete. I'll call this override, actually, because the user won't be interacting with this. So what you would do is on step run, you specify a particular flow to pick to go. And what this flow is going to do is it's going to have access to the not only all the assignment details, but most importantly, it has access to the assignment ID right here. All right.
Mm.
So what you can do is you can send this assignment ID to your external service, or you can send it wherever you're making that call to update that table, to update it with the external API you're using. You need to send this assignment ID. And if you
Okay.
don't want to do it anywhere there, you can run a flow inside of this particular step that will run as soon as it hits that step. And all you're going to have here, I'll just pay placeholder just so you can see here, but this would just be a simple step that sends that assignment ID to your external source.
Okay.
All right, so you can either pull it in from the data structure itself. That's why I've got it mapped over here, right? With create, you can have this update that data structure like a selective update. There are a lot of different ways that you can do this, but the point is that you need to get that assignment ID out. All right, the
Uh-huh.
assignment ID is going to be for this one. What you'll do then is under assignment setup, go to the very bottom, add an action definition. I'm going to uncheck respond via email. The outcome name is going to be, I don't want to call this email response. I want to call this API response. All right, and it's going to update that and then done. And then what happens is that you can now specify in the decision services, just a moment, I'll put these both here. From that external API, go under here, designers. Where are you? Where did you go? Catalog, services. Where did it go? Assignments? No. All user entities? No. Pardon me for a moment. I'm trying to remember
Oh, you're fine.
exactly where I put that, or where it goes. But the idea is that there is a service pre-built into decisions that you can call. It's an assignment service, and you pass in that assignment ID and a constant name for the outcome. And what that will do is what will happen is the users will complete this. This was created before. I'm sure I'm just doing this to demonstrate the information. And then right here, you have your step that's going to pause this flow. This flow is going to be in a different state where it's okay to keep it here for a long time, right? You're not going to lose data this way that's inside of this flow. And that external API calls the decision service. It's a default service, so you can use it for, it's not flow specific. You can call that service for anywhere inside of your decision server, pass in the assignment ID and pass in the outcome path name, and it will complete this along that outcome path. And then all you do from there is yeah, yours is a set state, but for
Yeah.
here it's a set entity state for the other one. And actually, I want that on the other outcome path from the API response.
And you just said specifically that it needs to be on the same decisions instance server for it to be callable like this?
That's right. It's not project specific. No, no, no. It doesn't have to be on the same server. What I'm trying to say by that is you don't have to pass in the flow ID. You can
Yeah.
reuse this same logic for multiple different flows without having to change how this functions. That's what
Gotcha.
I'm trying to say.
So so they'll so So the user fills out a form, it gets approved, and
Hmm.
then we're ready to send it to that intermediate table. But before we do that, we're going to basically create an assignment. And that assignment is, we're going to pass along that assignment ID to that intermediate table so that when that external software works on that row of the intermediate table, it makes its change to the field, and then it says, okay, here's an assignment ID that I can call an API on. I can close that assignment and it'll correspond to a case entity here that will then change the state.
That's exactly right.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, it will correspond to an assignment here, I should mention, not the case entity. It's not tied to the case entity. The case entity is tied to this because it's the same flow and I can pass in that ID from somewhere else. If you had something that fetched the case entity by criteria, you wouldn't have to go that route. I'll show you the other option here. Um, call flow as API. The other option you could do is if you had some sort of fetch criteria where maybe that assignment ID, like I mentioned, is passed into that table, right? So
Uh-huh.
you could say fetch criteria, um, or maybe it doesn't even have to be assignment ID. It could be the case ID. It could
Yeah,
just be anything.
we're gonna have a UID for each of these case IDs. So
Right. I guess if you knew where that was when you were calling it back, you could just set this up as an API service. Call
like
this
the
flow
flow itself.
direct. Yeah, call this separate flow. And then where's my set entity state? Yeah. Now, the nice part about this one is you don't have flows waiting in that state. They can handle that. That's what the platform's designed to do,
Yeah.
but this is a simple call. The downside of this is you need a way to get the unique entity ID to pass into there. Now, if you don't have an assignment ID because you're not doing the assignment route, you're going to pass that in another way through, the I guess the data structure itself maybe. Maybe there's a unique UID that you could pass into it, right?
Yeah, there definitely
So,
will be, yeah.
right, right, right. So there are ways to do it this way too, and this would function just the same as far as the outcome is concerned. The platform handles them differently because this flow isn't in a state. The other flow is completed, right? If you're doing it this way.
Hmm.
Yeah, after you've hit this, you're done in this flow. And then that is a separate flow, just update the state later.
Oh, so
So,
you're saying like in the case entity screen where you can see the kind of step by step. If I do this assignment, then it won't be considered 100% complete until this assignment gets closed. But if you do it the other way with just the call, then it'll be closed, but then we're changing the state after the fact.
yeah, basically.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
basically how it would work. I don't know how you need to track that. Now, you could put this in a pending state, right? This is a flow. I could put this in pending, approval, pending
Uh-huh.
API call right here. I could just
Yeah.
use the exact same step and ta-da, same thing works. So this becomes more of a preference now of how you want to set this up. Both
I
of these
gotcha.
are viable options. I don't even think they're the only options to do this. They're just the first two that came to my mind. I think they're the simplest.
Yeah, are there any like YouTube videos on APIs and decisions? Because it's
Yes,
something that we'd like
I've
to
created a
utilize more.
video on this method specifically,
Okay.
actually, that I can send you on YouTube. As far as the other option, I don't know if there's a video talking about that one specifically, but we do mention integration with API with decisions. We do have videos on that as a more broad topic. Let me pull up that video. Give me just a moment because I can get that in the chat right
Yeah,
now.
shoot me the link. That'd be awesome.
Absolutely. So I'll get you that one on external. Where is it? Wait on external system. That is the name of this video. So that's
Cool.
exactly
Yeah.
what you're trying to do, it sounds like. And then
Yes.
let me get that link. Hold on. There isn't a simple button for get link. You'd think there would be with this view, but anyways, let me where did that go? Where did my chat go? I don't usually have that one up. I usually just have the people I'm talking with and their
I get it.
questions. There it is. All right. I'm sending it to everyone, and that is the right link. Please tell me it's the right link. Yes, it is. Okay. Um, hello?
Yeah.
No, sorry. I don't know why it didn't get sent. Oh, there we go. All right,
There we
cool.
go.
All right. That should lead you to an about an 11.5 minute video called Wait on External System, which is how
Cool.
to complete assignments, which also means completing flows, right? Via an external system.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, highly recommend taking out. That's what this method is. I would take a look at that. It doesn't talk about case entity specifically, so you would have to use your own set state logic, but it does talk about how to make it wait on that external system and how that external system sends it back, as well as it goes to the exact name of the service that I couldn't find right now.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm sure as I build it out, I'll have more questions as it goes, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, cool. Glad to hear it. All right, let's go to our next question. It looks like it's a multi-part. It's from Corbin. Corbin, I'm going to mute you real quick so you can talk. I'm going to read your question aloud. I watched Lunch and Learn questions from 2.5 about getting the correct base URL for the current environment, and the recommendation was to use a flow input. We'd like to find an alternative solution rather than having this as an input to each of these flows. I'm thinking of possibly storing configuration entities with environmental properties. We need similar to appsettings.json files in the .NET project. How do you get the current decision server or environment name? We use this to pull the correct configuration entity. I tried the get server name step, but it's not returning anything for us. Get server name step might not be returning anything for you due to permissioning. I will check that real quick, but I know what you're talking about. Let me pull that up real quick and see if I can get that running.
Okay. And just wondering if there's any better way to accomplish this. That seemed like maybe a good way to do it. If we could store them as create some custom configuration entities with any properties we need, then we can create one of those for each environment and have a shared flow that pulls all those entities and then uses that step to check the current environment and then parse the configuration entity just for that environment. And then we could use that flow across environments that way.
And you're trying to
Really, it's for this case, we're just trying to get the base URL. There may be other cases where we want to set some environmental properties similarly to what we would use appsettings.json for in a .NET project. So that's why I was thinking of maybe copying that design and implementing it in decisions. Unless there's
So let me make sure I understand something real quick here. So you're trying to get the base portal URL. I'm guessing that ranges environment to environment, right? Like that's what you're trying to have is something that can be passed along to different environments. Or I'm trying to, I guess what I'm trying to understand, let me get this, is why base portal URL here doesn't work.
I want to get a base URL for some other service, not the base URL for decisions.
Oh, a base URL for a service that you're calling.
Correct.
Okay.
And I'll be calling a different environment. In each environment, it'll have a different location.
Mm, okay. So something like a project variable wouldn't work for that.
What does that look like? I
I'll
haven't
show
used
you. So configuration variables. Are you in V8 or V9? This matters for this.
V8, I believe.
You're in V8. Okay, so you'll have access to global constants at the moment. What that's going to do is you set up a particular constant here. I'll call this API URL. All right. You can set the type of how it's going to be formatted right here. I'm just going to make it string for now, just so we can see all of the values here. And this will be my API.com, whatever it is, right? Whatever your base URL is. I know it's not .com, but I'm just trying to give an example here. Create that project constant. Go over here, back to our flow get server. Now you have access under here to project constants, and you can use that in any flow in your project.
And then how do I set that to a different value for each environment?
The way that you would do that, so in V8, let me think about this. How do you alternate that? In V8, I think you can choose to exclude project constants from the repo when you check them in, so each environment uses its own, right?
that
So
would
you just give
require
it
us.
the same name. Let me confirm that with someone, but I think that's how it happened. Do you plan to upgrade to V9 anytime soon? Because the way that that works changes.
I don't know what the roadmap is with our DevOps team there, but it is on their backlog.
Okay, gotcha. Let me go through V9 as well, just so you're aware. And you'll have this video posted later, so you can look at. In V9, the way that we would recommend doing this is you create a separate project. Here, I'll exit out of here. You create a separate project like one of these that houses all of the environment variables that you need. And then what would happen is you declare dependencies to that project so your other projects get to see those. And the way you keep them separate is from that one project, you make check-ins to the repo on different branches with different variables that you would then pull out. But because they're different versions of the exact same variable, when you call them from your other projects, you don't need to remap everything. You're just going to get different values. And because it's not the same project, any changes made to your projects that aren't the environment variables project would not affect what gets updated in the environment variables project. It's a dependency. It's not like altering it. The repo isn't counting that as an update for the environment variables project.
Does that still require logging into each environment and changing what the value is in that environment? Or is there a way you can apply that to the project and say, here's all my environments and what the value should be for the environments?
Yeah, you don't have to go into each environment and redirect it. What you do is in your dev, you check in 3 different branches from that separate constants project. So here's project variables, right? That's where this would be what you'd be using. You check in 3 different branches and pull those branches out into QA, test, prod, whatever from there. And then as long as your other projects have a declared dependency on these project and is using let's call, API URL, you're going to get a different version of API URL for each environment that you have that project checked into.
How do you control which branch each environment uses?
Through check-in, repo check-in, checkout processes. So I would check this into, hello? Am I not connected to a repo server? Hello? Oh, actually, I remember I had the repo on my VM and I shut that down, so I'd have to boot that up real quick. But upon check-in, and I can send you a video with like repo versioning and stuff. We've got a whole thing that discusses that in depth. But yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so the idea here is that when you check it in, you either create a branch inside of the repository from your original branch and then check in the changes to that branch. Actually, I think that's the best way to do that. I'll get you that video as well, but that would be the best way to handle that. You were mentioning pulling information about the API calls for each server. Are you looking for a way to dynamically determine which server needs which API calls? Is that what the question is?
No, that's not to that extent.
Okay.
So it sounds like this approach. I mean, is the different branches for each environment a V9 feature? Or is that part of V8 as well?
Oh, that's V8 too. The only difference in V8 is you don't have, you can have dependencies, but you don't have everything project segregated like you do in V9. So you still have access to global constants, lookup list and constants. So you have things here. You can see that the creation step for this was taken away in V9, but you have access to global constants in V8 that you can then manually make in each environment and then just make sure it's pulling from that same entity name, right? In dev, in prod, in repo, or whatever. I would have to check if that one requires remapping. I will take a look into that for you, and I will get you an answer on that. But I do they don't have project specific constants in V8. So you can still do the same branching function if you wanted to push it that way. Yeah, that would work. Yeah, you could branch it. You would just have to make sure your global constants aren't under one of your projects, right? Because if you make changes to that project, it's going to check in those changes and it assumes that the global constant is part of those changes and would update it from dev. So you just have to make sure that the global constants in V8 are not part of whatever projects you're putting in, but just dependencies of those projects.
Okay.
Yeah. That would be the primary approach with that. I will get you that repo video. I can find the repo video right now because this is exactly what the repo versioning is for. Like, this is why repo versioning is such a useful tool, is to be able to make these changes. So give me a moment while I search that up. I know we have a repository video. Where'd it go?
Okay. Today we're using date-based branches and then promoting those date-based branches up through the environment as they're tested.
I apologize. I don't think I quite understood the question.
When we make a change, we check it in with the date, and so we're using the date-based branches to promote those up through the environments.
Okay, gotcha. All right. I see. You can make different branches per project, so you could still include the global constants as their own project. Let me make sure you can add them to a project as well in V8. I'll check those. Hold on. Where'd the repo videos go? Give me just a moment here. I actually think it's a whole playlist. Where are my repo videos? Well, they're not. I didn't make them, but
But it sounds like with this, we would need like the date underscore dev underscore QA underscore prod to have each different one,
that
or
depends. Are you up? I was gonna say that depends on. Are you updating the global constants that regularly?
no, it would just be like setting the host name of our other server for each of the environments.
You shouldn't need your other environments to change that way then, because all you would need is a QA, dev, and prod branch for the separate project, right? Because branches aren't universal, they're per project.
Okay, so just for the global constants project then.
That's what I was saying. Yeah. So that global constants project needs its own branches, but because they're dependencies, right, you should be able to update the other ones without updating the global constant ones, because the global constants are dependencies. They're not part of the project. They're not part of the check-in.
Okay, I'll look at that with our team and see if that's an approach that can work for us.
Yeah. And then here is the hold on, where'd it go? Yeah. All right. Here is the playlist to our repository information as well. Please reach out if you have more questions tomorrow. I would be very glad to answer. And also, I think we got another person in the chat who would like to give some insight into this as well. So let me unmute. There you go. There you go.
Hey guys, we've dealt with this similar problem with our database connections because of they're different going up the stack depending on what environment we're in. So initially we brought this up on version 8, just like you're at right now, and we did the global variables. But what we did is we set a global variable in each environment, and this gets easier when you're in a project like it was just saying, once you got global variables set up in a project, it migrates with the project, so you don't have to touch them again. But we set up a global variable in dev for each environment. So we got a dev global variable, a Q&A global variable, and a prod global variable. And then what we did is we set up a flow that we run that you can call from anywhere that tells you what environment you're in and picks the correct global variable and sends it to the connection string. So that we always have, no matter what environment you're in, it knows what environment you're in and sends the correct connection string based on the global variables.
And then how did you check your current environment? Are you using that get?
The base portal URL tells you what decisions environment you're in.
Okay.
And then you use that decisions environment because that's how we, I mean, that's just how we solved it out, because it depended on what decisions environment we're in as to what database environment we want to connect to, because we have a one-to-one correspondence there. So we check what decisions environment we're in. If we're in Q&A, we connect to our Q&A database. And that's, I mean, that's how we've done that. But
And
we
then-
have a little flow that determines the environment. And
Okay,
then we go from there with the constant variables.
what's the difference, the get base portal URL and the get server name, Gregory?
The server name actually gives you the name of the server you're running on. It's not the decision server, it's whatever you've got in the background. So the
Okay.
actual physical environment that you have decisions installed against is the server name. The base portal URL is the actual URL to the decisions environment.
It sounds like either could potentially work. I wonder if I try and get base portal URL, if that might also be empty for me, if there's a permission thing with that, like you mentioned.
I think it's a permission thing. It's not working on mine. It used to work on mine.
Okay,
So I'm actually going to investigate this a little bit more because I thought I just had a bug in mind because I was on an unstable build of the project recently. But if you're running into the same issue, I do wonder if there might be an issue with that step because I was using it pretty recently before I upgraded. So I'm wondering if that's what's going on. But to kind of get back to the other part with the match here, you would pass in, not here actually. Let me just go to flow data base portal URL. Right. So if this is dev or something like that, you would match this to whichever one you would want, and you could have different processes that execute or send to different flows or pass in different URL parameters based upon whatever your portal based URL matches. And
okay.
these would be your different environments set up.
And then that would return, so I wouldn't need to create like an entity for that. I could just use a project variable to then return. Or how would I get that piece mapped in?
As far as well, I mean, that depends on how you call this. You could, I get what you're saying. I mean, there are a bunch of ways to return. I'm just trying to think of what's the simplest option because I feel like creating a whole data structure to house that, there's got to be a better way in my mind, but let's see here. So you pass in the base
So I'm
portal
after a
URL.
specific, like the other participant was just mentioning, like it had the dev global, QA global, prod global. And so how would I, if those are all variables on the project, how would I reference those, or are those not variables on the project?
We set
Those
up a
are
truth
variables
table
on the
for that.
project. So in V8, they're variables in the environment. In V9, they're variables on the project. So in V8, you're saying in this environment, this is the global constants, these are the global variables that I have access to, and I'm going to make that different environment to environment. And you can reference those, right? In you don't even need base portal URL at that point. You can run a separate flow to get base portal URL depending on how you're trying to process that initially, but you could set that up environment to environment. If you're in V9, then what you're doing is the project variables merge. You know what? I've got a video on this. I'm going to send you that. I literally made this video talking about this. Let me pull that up. Hold on. Where did it go? Yeah, global constants and project variables, and then managing environment-specific variables across development, UAT, and production servers. Now, that one is geared towards V9. I do want to preface that right now, but I at least want to give you access to that to make sure that, where'd it go? To make sure you can work with that. I need to minimize some stuff. Give me a moment here. Okay, and then grabbing that. Where did the chat go? All right, here's one. And then let me get you the other one, which talks a little bit about the history and gives you kind of an overview of how they function. Because I think this is the route that you're going to want to go. You can do get machine name, right? You could do that, figure out what environment you're in, and then run the right queries from there. That's exactly what this step is doing with base portal URL. You're getting the right ones and you're running the right things from there, right? So get machine name, string match step with base portal URL, they're doing the exact same function. What you're looking to do, though, is to make sure you don't have to go in and manually update all your API calls once you start pushing them. And that's kind of where these, or specifically the first video I sent you is getting into about how to handle that. And the idea is you need some sort of either project variable or global constant so that you can reference that. Otherwise, you're going to have a flow that you're running at the start of every one of your other flows to get that information from the machine name when you can set it as something global that you can just fetch environment to environment, right?
That's exactly what we want to avoid.
Yeah. So you're definitely going to want to look into global constants. That's going to be the route. I can't think of a more efficient route than that, and managing which environment has which global constant so that you can just call it the same one in each environment, right? Give it the same name, but its actual value is different.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will check as far as, again, confirming that that's how you should do that in VA. I'll reach out to our devs and just kind of get a, hey, this is right. Like there's no caveat here that we're missing. So I'll reach out and I will let you know. Okay. Cool. We still have a good bit of people here last I checked. So like if anyone else has more questions, please hop in. We've got plenty of time, got plenty of QA space left. So yeah. I guess while I'm waiting, I'll go on the track of APIs a little bit and kind of talk about how decisions handle some authorization stuff. Because we're running into a little issue with that this morning. So it seems like it'd be a good idea to discuss this. So in decisions version 9, you have the, oh, wait, we got a, oh, sorry, Corbin, I missed the other parts of your question here.
No, I just posted it. I know I was trying to
Okay.
my chat to post it. Sorry.
No, you're good. OData capabilities, recommendations for composition logic on multiple OData endpoints, and you call different OData endpoints and build an object from them. Documentation, OData. Can you give me an example here? This isn't something in our platform. I don't
Didn't copy the link over. Here's the documentation link I had.
Okay.
Yeah, so once I have that base URL, I'm going to use it to get to some OData endpoints, but there's going to be several of them, and I'm going to do some composition logic to take the different elements and push them together into a single object. So I was just wondering if you have any built-in tools to do that, or I just need to develop something capable, something custom to inside of a flow to have multiple OData endpoints, pull those objects back, and then do the manipulation there in a custom manner.
If I can be honest, I don't know off the top of my head. That'll be something I need to reach out to. This is not a part of the product that I have touched much, if I can be honest.
Okay.
But let me at least help you with some of this setup, because I do know how to set up some of this integration stuff, even if I'm not exactly sure how to manipulate the OData itself. So one thing I want to mention, this little OAuth token portion right here, I'm assuming you set up API calls before, but I at least want to show you how Decisions handles that, because that is going to need to be set up before you can actually run this external service for OData. All right, so give me just a moment here to exit out, and then I'm going to make this large again. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. All right, so in version 8, you're going to see all your integrations over here under setting integrations, and you set them up here. In version 9, you can do them project specific. It's the same thing. So I'm just going to go into V9 because I've actually got something set up as far as OAuth is concerned. What happens is you first set up a provider, all right? And then the way that works is OAuth version 2 is pretty much the only one that actually works anymore, right? You pass in the token request URL for what you're going to fetch from that particular website. You got to pass in the authorized URL. Those are both going to be from the website, the documentation of that website. That is not decisions related. What is decisions related is the callback URL. And that callback URL is going to be whatever your base portal URL is, followed by /handle token response. And I do want to mention this is case sensitive. Learn that firsthand. But that is what you're going to want to do in order to set that up. And then if you're using client consumer key, secret key, client ID, secret key, you're going to want to pass those in here, right? as well as whatever the auth type. Now, you could set up a JWT token as well if you wanted to set up that auth type, but just getting client secret and stuff, that they've usually got that on most of the sites you're going to be trying to integrate with anyway. So this is probably going to be a more direct approach. But that's how you set up the provider. And then once you do that, you get your token, right? So you specify the token right over here. Hello. I'm going to edit this. Oh, yeah, I just have to create a new one. It won't let me edit. I forgot about that. You specify how it's going to be authorized if you want to use client credentials again, password, auth code for whatever you're going to be doing. You have to give it a name. Either use default keys or the ones that you specified back in the provider section, or pass in new ones, pass in your scopes, additional URL code and values. You have to test the request and then hit OK. And then once you've got that, now you have a token that when you're setting up different integrations and decisions, like the Odata one that you saw, that drop down where it says pick token, it's going to show you the entity name here for the token that you created. So that's how you authorize it. As far as the actual working with it and configuring that, I will reach out and ask about that. That is not something I know right now.
Okay.
But I will get you some information on that.
I'm doing a little discovery there to see the capabilities of OData within decisions to make a decision on if we're going to do the OData and composition processing before it gets to decisions, or if it makes sense just to expose the OData endpoints directly to decisions and do that composition within decisions itself. So kind of balancing the tooling capability there, and if it makes more sense to do that in C# or do it over here.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll make sure that I get you that info more, just so you can understand like what that setup process looks like, and if it's going to require like custom SDK sort of things, or what the platform can offer with manipulation of that data automatically.
Perfect. Appreciate that.
You got it. Alrighty, let me go back to the actual LNL I set up here. There we go. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Have we had any new people join? We have not. All right. Jeremy McNeil, let me allow you to talk real quick. I know you don't have a question yet, but I just want to mention that I did reach out regarding your ask and have not gotten a response back from the devs yet that I've seen. So I will let you know as far as confirmation on the visibility of those entities with the project conversion. I'm pretty sure you should be good again, but let me get that confirmation. I'll send you an email.
It sounds good. Yeah, we're still in the midst of all of our project validation from conversion, so not in a
Yeah.
big rush for that answer quite yet.
Yeah, you're good. And you're going to be able to convert on dev and see that too first, right? Because that's the process. You do it on dev and then you push it.
Yeah, we're working through dev right now, converting everything to the version 9 projects and working through all these other weird things that are popping up. So
yeah, whenever sometimes cyclical dependencies just come up when you didn't even think there were any, especially on something that large, I'm sure. Just over time it happens. All right, cool beans. Well, I do not see any more Q&A questions, so I think I will end this. We're pretty close to time anyway, so don't have a problem with that. Thank you all very much for attending, and I appreciate y'all for coming out. It's going to be Jeremy leading tomorrow, and then I'll be leading again on Wednesday. All right, have a good day, y'all.